Jennifer tightened her grip on the strap of her worn handbag as the mansion gates opened slowly, creaking like the jaws of a beast, ready to swallow her whole. She had never seen a house this big in her life. High walls covered in ivy, glass windows that reflected the morning sun like sharp blades, and a silence so heavy it made her heartbeat echo in her ears. This is just a job, she told herself. Get in, do your work, and get paid. At 24, Jennifer had learned to survive on hope and humor. She didn't have much. A small room she shared with her cousin, and a smile that could light up a funeral. When the agency called her about a live-in caregiver position for a wealthy client, she said yes without thinking twice. What they didn't tell her was that the client was Mathew Blake, the man everyone in town whispered about, the billionaire who had once been the face of every business magazine, now hidden away like a ghost. They said he lost his wife and son in a car accident 6 years ago and had never been the same since. And now, he was waiting for her. Jennifer followed the butler through the long marble hallway, her cheap sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The air smelled of old books, expensive whiskey, and loneliness. Then the butler opened a door and stepped aside. There he was. Mathew Blake sat in a wheelchair near the window, staring out at the sprawling garden he never touched anymore. His hair was overgrown, dark waves falling into his eyes. His beard was thick and unkempt, making him look more like a castaway than a billionaire. But his eyes, cold, grey and sharp, were what stole Jennifer's breath. They locked on her like a predator sizing up prey. "You're late," he said, his voice low and rough, like it hadn't been used in days. Jennifer blinked, then grinned. Traffic was bad. "You know how it is." His jaw tightened. He didn't know how it was. He hadn't been outside those gates in years. "Your name?" he asked flatly. "Jennifer, but you can call me Jen." "No," he said, turning back to the window. "I won't be calling you anything, because you won't be staying." Jennifer's smile faltered for a second, then returned, brighter than before. "Well, that's one way to say hello." "I said goodbye," he replied coldly. "You're fired." The butler shifted uncomfortably, but Jennifer just tilted her head, studying the man in the chair. His shoulders were broad under the wrinkled black t-shirt, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair like he wanted to break them. He was angry. Angry at life, at the world, at her for simply standing there, breathing. And yet, something about him didn't scare her. If anything, she wanted to laugh. "Fired? You didn't even hire me yet," she said, stepping closer. "Doesn't matter." Leave. Jennifer crossed her arms. "You haven't even given me a chance." He finally turned to face her fully, his eyes stormy with irritation. "I don't need to. You won't last. None of them do." For a moment, their eyes locked, and something shifted. Mathew felt it like a crack in the wall he had built for 6 long years. Something warm, something dangerous. He hated it. "Pack your things," he said sharply. "You're leaving today." Jennifer just smiled wider, a spark of mischief in her dark eyes. "We'll see about that." Mathew's jaw clenched. He didn't like her confidence. He didn't like her smile. And most of all, he didn't like that for the first time in years. His heart wasn't numb anymore. Jennifer stood her ground, her chin slightly lifted. She wasn't going to let some grumpy billionaire ruin her chance at a paycheck. "I came for a job, Mr. Blake," she said softly but firmly. "At least let me do it for one day. If you hate me after that, I'll walk out and never come back." Mathew's cold grey eyes narrowed. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Then he turned his chair slightly, giving her his profile as if she weren't worth the effort of a full glance. "Do what you want," he muttered. "You'll leave anyway." They all do. Jennifer frowned at that, but before she could respond, he wheeled himself toward the desk in the corner, dismissing her without another word. The conversation was over, at least for him. For Jennifer, it was just beginning. The hours crawled by. She cleaned the room, organized the medication on his bedside table, and even opened the curtains wider to let in the morning sun. Mathew didn't speak to her again. He sat at his desk, flipping through old files he probably wasn't even reading. But every so often, when she moved across the room, she felt his gaze on her back, quick, sharp glances that vanished the moment she turned her head. When lunchtime came, Jennifer appeared with a tray. "Time to eat." "I'm not hungry," he said flatly. "You still need to eat," she replied, setting the tray on the table beside him. "I said no." She met his glare with calm eyes. "And I said yes." Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or something he didn't want to name. He hated being challenged. For 6 years, everyone tiptoed around him. But this woman, she stood there, holding a spoon like she was ready to battle him with it. "Leave the food," he said finally, his voice tight, "and get out of my sight." Jennifer placed the spoon on the tray, her voice gentle but firm. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. That plate better be empty." And then she walked out, leaving Mathew staring at the door like he wasn't sure whether to be furious or impressed. That night, Mathew lay awake in his massive bed, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear her voice in his head, bright and warm like sunlight through a storm. He hated that sound, hated what it did to him. For years, his heart had been a frozen thing, safe behind walls of anger and grief. But now there was a crack, and cracks were dangerous. He would fire her tomorrow. He had to. Before that smile, that laugh, that maddening persistence thawed the last piece of him he swore would never come back to life. The next morning, Jennifer walked into the study with a bright smile, holding a fresh cup of coffee. "Good morning, Mr. Blake." Mathew looked up from his wheelchair, his grey eyes sharp as glass. He was freshly shaven, or rather less messy than before. The beard was still there, but trimmed like he had at least made an effort. She noticed, but she didn't say a word. "Sit down," he said curtly, his voice low and controlled. Jennifer blinked. "Is something wrong?" "Yes." He rolled closer to the desk and opened a folder. "I've spoken to my lawyer. Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. Pack your things and leave within the hour." Jennifer stared at him for a long moment, her smile fading. Her chest tightened, not because of the job, but because of the look in his eyes. Cold, final, like this was the easiest thing in the world for him. She swallowed hard, forcing a smile back onto her face. "Wow, you're really committed to being alone, huh?" "This isn't about commitment," he said sharply. "It's about control. And I will not have someone—" He stopped, jaw tightening, fists curling on the armrests. His voice dropped to a growl. "Someone who makes me feel things I don't want to feel." Jennifer froze. Her heart skipped. He hadn't meant to say that out loud, but he didn't take it back either. She took a slow breath. "Mr. Blake." "Stop talking," he snapped, spinning his chair toward the window. "Just leave." Jennifer stared at him for a few seconds longer and then turned to go. She reached the doorway when the sound ripped through the room like a gunshot. Jennifer spun around to see Mathew on the floor, his wheelchair toppled over, papers scattered like fallen leaves. His face was twisted in pain, his hand gripping his leg, the leg that hadn't worked in 6 years. "Mathew!" She dropped the coffee and ran to him, dropping to her knees. "Don't touch me," he hissed, trying to push her away. his pride burning hotter than the pain. "Stop being stubborn," Jennifer shouted, her voice trembling as she gripped his arm. "You're hurt. Let me help you." For a moment, he fought her. Hard. His strength surprised her, but not as much as the look in his eyes. A storm of rage, shame, and something else. Something raw. Finally, his resistance broke, and she managed to pull him upright, her arms around him. His breath was hot against her neck, his heartbeat wild under her hands. The air between them changed. Thick, heavy, dangerous. Her voice was soft now. "You don't have to do everything alone." He stiffened at her words. His jaw brushed her temple, and for a split second, he let himself breathe her in. The warmth, the quiet strength. It scared him more than the fall. Jennifer eased him back into the chair, her hands lingering for a second too long before pulling away. "I'm calling the doctor," she said, reaching for her phone. "No." His voice was rough, almost pleading. Don't tell them." "Why not?" she asked gently. His eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time, the ice was cracking. "Because if my family finds out, they'll never stop interfering. They'll use it as another excuse to replace you." Jennifer blinked. The words hung between them like a secret neither of them wanted to admit out loud. "You don't want me gone?" she asked softly. Mathew didn't answer. He just looked at her, his grey eyes dark and conflicted. And that silence told her everything. Jennifer stayed by his side for the rest of the morning, making sure he was comfortable after the fall. She adjusted the cushions on his bed, checked his bruised arm, and even convinced him to drink water. He didn't speak. Not at first. He just watched her, silently, intensely, as she moved around the room. Her hair was messy from rushing to help him earlier, and there was a coffee stain on her shirt. Yet she looked radiant, alive, everything he wasn't. When she finally sat down across from him, he broke the silence with a voice that was barely a whisper. "You should have left when you had the chance." Jennifer looked at him, her brows lifting. "And miss out on the fun?" Not a chance. He didn't smile, but something flickered in his eyes, something he tried to smother. "Why do you do this?" he asked quietly. "Do what?" "Stay." His gaze locked with hers, sharp and raw at the same time. "You don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. Everyone leaves eventually, Jennifer. Everyone." Her throat tightened, but she held his stare. "Maybe I'm not everyone." For a heartbeat, the world stood still. His jaw clenched, like her words had cut deep into something he thought was long dead. He looked away first, gripping the wheels of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. "This, whatever you're trying to do," his voice was harsh again, as if anger could drown the truth. "It won't work. You can't fix me. No one can." Jennifer leaned forward slightly, her voice calm. "Who said I'm trying to fix you?" Matthew's head turned sharply, eyes burning into hers. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. And in that moment, just for a second, he let the mask slip. The pain in his eyes was raw, unguarded. It stole her breath. Then it was gone. "Get out," he said suddenly, his voice like steel. "Leave me alone." Jennifer blinked, stung by the sharpness of it. But before she could argue, he wheeled himself toward the window, turning his back to her completely. The conversation was over, but as Jennifer walked out, she knew what she saw in his eyes wasn't something she imagined. There was a man behind those walls. Broken, yes, but still alive. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she wasn't going to give up on him. The rain came suddenly, hammering against the tall windows like an angry drum. Thunder cracked across the sky, and for a moment, the entire mansion trembled. Jennifer was in the kitchen washing dishes when the lights flickered. She glanced toward the hallway, her instincts prickling. Something felt wrong. She hadn't seen Mathew for hours. After their argument, she had seen him enter his study and shutting the door behind him. With the storm raging outside, the silence inside felt heavier, thicker, like the air before a disaster. She dried her hands and walked toward the study. "Mr. Blake?" she called softly, knocking on the door. No answer. Her heart thudded. She pushed the door open. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of a single lamp. Papers were scattered across the floor, a photo frame face down near the desk. And then she saw him. By the window, his chair turned toward the rain. His shoulders shook. Jennifer froze. Mathew Blake, the man who never cracked, the man whose voice could cut glass, was trembling. She stepped closer, her breath shallow. That's when she saw his hands gripping the armrests, veins taut, and his head bowed so low she could barely see his face. But she didn't need to. The sound of his ragged breathing, the way his body curled in on itself, it told her everything. He was crying. Jennifer's heart clenched. She'd imagined him angry, cruel, even cold, but never this, never broken. "Mathew." Her voice was barely above a whisper. His head snapped up. His eyes were red, wild, like an animal cornered. "Get out," he barked, the words raw, desperate. Jennifer flinched, but didn't move. "Mathew, you are—" "I said get out." His voice thundered louder than the storm, but his tears betrayed him. "I don't want your pity. I don't need anyone. Do you hear me? No one." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling at her sides. For a second, she almost left. Almost. Instead, she crossed the room and knelt in front of him. "Stop pretending you're made of stone," she said softly, her voice shaking, but steady enough to pierce the walls he built. "You're human, Mathew. You're allowed to hurt." His breath hitched. For a fraction of a second, something inside him shattered completely. His hands clenched tighter, his chest heaving like he couldn't breathe. And then, he grabbed the photo frame from the floor and hurled it across the room. Glass exploded against the wall, shards scattering like fallen stars. Jennifer didn't move. Her eyes never left his. "I should have died with them," he rasped, his voice breaking like glass. "Do you understand? It should have been me, Jennifer, not them." Her throat closed. She didn't know the full story yet, but the pain in his voice gutted her. For a moment, there was no storm outside, no mansion, no years of silence, just him, broken and bleeding in ways no one could see. Jennifer lifted a hand, slowly, gently, and touched his clenched fist. Just a touch. His eyes dropped to her hand like it burned him. For one heartbeat, he didn't pull away. Then he did, jerking back like her touch could kill him. His chair rolled back sharply, putting distance between them. "Get out," he whispered this time, not angry, not commanding, just broken. Jennifer's eyes stung, but she stood slowly. She didn't say another word as she walked out. Behind her, the storm roared louder, but it wasn't half as wild as the one inside him. Sunlight streamed through the mansion's tall windows, spilling gold across the marble floors. It was a new day, but nothing felt new. Jennifer walked into the dining room, her heart heavy from the stormy night before. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mathew's face, broken, raw, nothing like the angry man who had rolled into her life days ago. And now, she didn't know what to expect. He was already there, at the head of the table, coffee cup in hand, his shirt crisp. If not for the faint redness around his eyes, you'd think last night never happened. But Jennifer knew better. "Good morning," she said softly, forcing a smile. His eyes lifted to hers, cool and distant, like a wall slammed down overnight. "You're still here." She froze. "Yes, I thought you shouldn't have," he cut in sharply, setting his cup down with a deliberate clink. "You're fired, Jennifer. Again. Pack your things." Her heart sank, but she masked it with a calm she didn't feel. "Why?" "Because I saw you being human for 5 seconds." His jaw tightened, the muscle ticking. "Because you crossed a line." Jennifer blinked, incredulous. "A line? What was I supposed to do? Leave you like that? Pretend I didn't hear you breaking?" "Yes!" The word exploded from him like thunder. The sound startled even him. He closed his eyes for a moment, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles whitened. When he spoke again, his voice was low and cold. "Yes, you should have. You work here, that's all. You don't get to fix me." Her chest ached at the bitterness in his tone. "I wasn't trying to fix you, Mathew." "Mr. Blake," he corrected harshly, his eyes flashing like steel. Jennifer stared at him for a long moment. The man from last night, the one who had cracked wide open, was gone. In his place was the fortress again, taller and colder than ever. She nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Fine, Mr. Blake." And then she turned and walked away before he could see the tears burning her eyes. Mathew sat there, watching her leave, every muscle in his body screaming, with the urge to call her back. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because if she stayed, she'd destroy him completely. Jennifer stormed down the long hallway, her footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Her heart was pounding, but not from anger. At least, that's what she told herself. She was angry, yes, furious even. How dare he throw her away like trash after last night? After she saw a piece of his soul he clearly didn't want anyone to see. She reached her room and slammed the door shut. Throwing herself on the bed, she wanted to cry, but the tears refused to fall. Instead, she lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the storm inside her simmer. By evening, her bags were packed. She couldn't take this anymore. The man was impossible, unreachable. She dragged her suitcase into the hallway, her chin high. If he wanted her gone, fine, she would leave. But then she heard it. A loud crash, metal against marble, echoed from his wing of the house. Jennifer froze. "Mathew?" No answer. Her heart leaped into her throat as she dropped her bag and sprinted toward the sound. When she burst through his bedroom door, the sight nearly stopped her heart. Mathew was slumped on the floor beside his wheelchair, his body shaking violently. His face was pale, slick with sweat, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. "Oh my God!" Jennifer dropped to her knees beside him. "Mathew, talk to me." He tried to speak, but his lips barely moved. His skin burned under her touch, so hot it scared her. Fever, and it wasn't mild. "Hang on," she whispered, panic clawing at her chest. She grabbed a blanket, wrapping it around him as she dialed for the doctor, with trembling hands. Within minutes, the private physician was rushing in, checking vitals, preparing an IV. Jennifer never left his side, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. And then it happened. In a weak, raspy voice, his eyes half open, he whispered her name. "Jennifer." Her heart cracked wide open. She leaned closer, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." His fingers tightened around hers, just barely, but enough for her to feel it, enough to make her heart ache in ways she didn't understand. But even in that fragile moment, Jennifer knew one thing for sure. No matter how much he tried to push her away, no matter how high he built those walls, something inside him wanted her to stay, and she wasn't going to let him fight this battle alone. The storm outside had long passed. But inside Matthew's room, the air still felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Jennifer sat slumped in the chair beside his bed, exhaustion pulling at her body. She had been there all night, never letting go of his hand, even when the fever finally broke. The doctor had left hours ago, assuring her he would recover. Now, as the early morning light crept in through the curtains, she felt his hand twitch in hers. Her eyes snapped open. "Matthew," she whispered, leaning forward. Slowly, his lashes fluttered open. He looked confused at first, disoriented, then his gaze focused on her, and softened in a way that nearly stole her breath. "You're still here," he murmured, voice low and rough from fever. Jennifer managed a shaky smile. "Where else would I be? You scared me half to death." He studied her for a long moment, his throat working as if words were fighting to come out. Finally, he said, almost in disbelief, "You stayed all night?" "Yes." Her voice cracked, emotion bubbling to the surface. "Of course I did. Someone had to make sure you didn't." She stopped herself, biting her lip, unable to finish. Matthew's eyes darkened, something raw flickering there. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "Jennifer." His voice was a whisper, like he was saying her name for the first time. She froze, heart thundering. The air between them tightened, electric. His hand slid to the back of her neck, pulling her a fraction closer. Her breath hitched, her lips parting, as his gaze dropped to her mouth. Hungry, conflicted. For one dizzying second, she thought he would kiss her. She wanted him to. God, she wanted him to. But then just as quickly, he let go. His hand fell back to the bed, as if burned. His jaw clenched, and he turned his head away. "You should go," he said. His voice cold again, but shaky, betraying the war inside him. Jennifer swallowed hard, her chest aching. She stood slowly, every nerve screaming at her to stay, to fight, but she didn't. Not this time. "Rest," she whispered, her voice trembling. And then she walked out, leaving the room heavy with everything that almost happened, and everything that still could. Behind her, Matthew closed his eyes, his hand curling into a fist, because for the first time in 6 years, he wanted something he swore he'd never want again. And that terrified him more than anything. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this tale, remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey into our African stories. Until then, stay curious, stay kind,